This is lesson 1.1 of the Algebra series. The title of the lesson is Writing Expressions and Equations, and our objective is to translate word phrases and sentences into expressions and equations. So what we're going to do is try to take real-life scenarios and put them into equations and expressions. And so let's begin. First thing we need to do is go over the rules. So on your study guide, pause this for a moment and write these down on your study guide. First thing we need to do is to choose the variables for unknowns. Second is to choose an appropriate operation: add, subtract, multiply, divide, exponents, correct symbols as far as equality or inequality. The third thing is to write the representative expression or equation in an order that reflects the nature of the problem. And most of the time it will be in the exact same order as what you read it, but there are a couple exceptions and we'll go over that. When I mentioned choosing an appropriate variable, I have an example here. This is a check stub that my son got from working. And we have rate of pay per hour, number of hours worked, and the gross wages. So when we go to choose variables, the amount or the rate of pay that he gets paid per hour, we may call that R. Whoops. And then the number of hours he works, we might call H. And the gross wages, we could call W. I didn't really want to use G for gross. So anyway, we'll go with W, and then what we'll have to do is decide what operations to use to be able to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, or equals, or less than, greater than, or whatever that goes with these variables. But that's how you choose variables. Here I have a copy of a sales receipt, and some of the things that can vary when you buy anything is the amount of tax. Whoops, I need to pick up a marker here. The amount of tax, or the total of the purchase, of course, depending on what you buy. Or our total could change, but it's really depends on those two things. And I guess the amount of cash that you pay with, that could change. Okay. So if I was going to choose variables, I would let the subtotal, I might let it be S, or I think in this case I'm just going to use T for total. And on the tax rate, I believe I'm going to use an R again for rate. And on the cash that I paid with, I think maybe I'll use C for cash. Okay. So that's the variables I could use when I'm doing that one. Once again, if you haven't written down these 3 steps, you need to go ahead and write those down on the study guide. So pause the video long enough to do that. Now I want to discuss choosing operations. The 4 main operations we use, of course, are add, subtract, multiply, and divide. You need to pause the video at this time so that you can fill these in on the study guide. As you write them down, pay close attention to how that, in your mind, that they would represent addition. For example, the word increased by underneath addition. If you had 7 and you increased it by 2, you would have to do 7 plus 2. So think about that each time you're writing one down. Pause the video for a moment so that you can write those down in the study guide. Okay, now that you have them written down, and it's very important that you have those written down because later we're going to use those. So it's good that you have a list of them. I also need you to write down these common words and wording that we use for exponents, equations, and inequalities. Okay, so one of the key words that you see a lot of times so that you know it's an equation or inequality is the word is. Being a linking verb, it makes it where that the expression is a sentence instead of just an expression. So that's one way you can kind of recognize whether you're going to need a algebraic expression or an algebraic sentence, which we end up calling equations or inequalities. So is a very key word there. The only one I see that doesn't have the word is in it is has the same amount as on the equality section. So take a moment, pause the video, and write those down in your study guide. Now that we've discussed appropriate operations, we need to talk about what order to put these operations in, and when we go to write them out, how to make sure that the way that it writes reflects correctly the way that we're reading it. Okay. So what we want to focus on right now is step number 3, which is to write the representative expression or equation in an order that reflects the nature of the problem. So as I said before, normally write it in the exact same order as what you read it, but there are a few exceptions, and I will go over the exceptions to the rule here in a minute. Let's say we were going to use just some random number, and so I'm going to let n equal our random number, okay? So if I wanted to do the sum of my random number and 4, I could do n plus 4. If I wanted to do my random number minus 3, I could put n minus 3. If I wanted to do my random number divided by 6, I'd put n divided by 6, and notice we use a fraction bar right there for divide. Now multiplication is a little bit different when you use a variable and a regular number. I mean, normally, you know, if I was going to say my random number times 2, or well, okay, I can do that. We'd write like that. But in algebra, we try to get away from using a dot so much because it looks like a decimal. And if we wrote it without it, well, then that might get confused as an exponent if you wrote the 2 after. So normally what we do is when we're multiplying a variable times a number, we usually write the number first. I mean, it's just convention. We're going to write 2n to represent a number times 2 or 2 times a number. Okay, so multiplication, if you've got a variable, you're going to put the number first. The number before it is called the coefficient. That's a term we'll learn later, but anyway. All right, let's talk about exceptions to the rule. The exceptions to the rule are the phrases more than, less than, added to, subtracted from, and divided into. In these instances, you are not going to write it in the exact same order as what you read it. For example, if it was 5 more than the random number, if we said 5 more, whoops, let me get my marker here. 5 more than the random number, which was n, we're not going to write 5 plus n. We would write n because that's what we're starting with, and if we're doing 5 more, we'd have to add 5. If I did 4 less than the random number, I'm going to start with my random number, and if I'm doing 4 less, I've got to minus 4. If I do 3 added to the random number, it means that I'm starting with the random number and adding 3. 7 subtracted from the random number, I'm going to take the random number and subtract 7. So you can see how these are not in the order that you read them. Okay, it actually reverses it, and those are the exception to the rule. Take a moment and on your study guide, go ahead and write down what the exceptions to the rule are. And I will use the next video to actually do the examples.